Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
You are?
Yeah, the Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, Pete Wright. How are you?
The one, the only. I'm so good. I don't know. Given the show today, I go in to look at the show notes today and look at the topic, and I think, okay, Nikki's just taken out, she's sharpened a stick, and she's just going to poke me with it.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
probably
what it's going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
This is therapy for me. So great.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. I'm sharpening right now as you do the little intro.
Why are you so calm about it? This isn't even funny to you. It's like very real. It's almost premeditated.
Well, let's just say I've had a little bit of experience with not with it personally, but definitely with clients. So that's why I'm not like rattled by it, because I'm hoping this will bring some awareness to some folks.
Well, me too. It's all or nothing day today on the ADHD podcast. And before we dig in, head over to takecontroladhd.com. Get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list right there on the homepage. Get an email with the latest episode and other great stuff every single week. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And our phone number is 503-664-4ADD. We love getting feedback any way you want to send it. Okay. All or nothing thinking. How did this come up? I mean, it feels like this is one of those things where you probably met with 3 opportunities to think about this, and therefore it is a podcast.
It is. It's so funny. I get inspiration everywhere. But yes, it is. Well, we were talking a lot about limiting beliefs, and I've talked a lot about this, these beliefs in my coaching groups. And a lot of times what happens is this all or nothing kind of mindset. And what I've noticed is that people don't notice that they're doing it. And that's why I'm hoping that it really brings awareness to folks, because we all have probably heard that one of the challenges with ADHD is this all or nothing, mindset. There's not a lot of flexibility. It's either good or it's bad. I either did really well or I just, did really, really bad.
For me, it's all about I either have all the time I need to do to get this project done, or I have no time to get this project
Absolutely. Done. And it's so interesting because you just mentioned, you must have had like 3 opportunities where this has kind of come up in your life. And it came up on a personal level too, but reverse. So my son was sick this week and he woke up with a temperature, and it wasn't real high, but it was enough for me to say, you should probably stay home. It was, I think, about 100 degrees. Right. And he's like, well, he was really concerned about school and didn't want to miss school. And he's like, well, I think what I'd like to do is go back to bed and, see how I feel when I wake up. And if I feel better, then I'd like to go back to school. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's such a good idea. I'm kind of thinking that if you have a fever still, you should just stay home. You know what he said to me? He's walking up the stairs and he's like, Mom, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Oh, dear.
He has no idea that I was thinking about doing this show. He doesn't even, there's no way he would even know. And that's what he said. And I'm like,
that's amazing.
Huh. Okay.
That's amazing.
So needless to say, he did wake up. His temperature went back down to like 99. And so we went ahead and let him go to school. So it wasn't all or nothing. We were flexible. Yeah. We met in the middle and he was fine. It all turned out well. But the point is, it's just like what you were saying. I either have a lot of time to do it or I don't. And this, I caught one, and I say caught because I'm not kidding you. People just don't realize that they're doing it. So I had a client who said, I really want to have some personal time in the morning. I want to do this on Thursdays. It's the best morning for me, but I just can't ever get it done. Like there's just always so many distractions. Well, the more we dig into it, I said, well, how much time do you want in the morning? Like, what are you thinking? And she's like, well, probably the whole morning, like 3 hours, but I can't ever find 3 hours in a row. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, what if we started at just 30 minutes instead of 3 hours? It doesn't have to be all 3 hours. It could just be 30 minutes. That's a great idea.
Yeah, suddenly you're taking ownership of the schedule by just changing your perspective a little bit.
Right. And I see this, of course, with like organizing, right? Because people think, well, I need to have a large amount of time. I need to have 4 hours. I need to have a whole weekend to get anything done. But really, all you need is maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day, consistently every day. So it's really kind of getting out of that thinking of it has to be all of this or none of it. A couple more examples that I'm sure people are going to relate to. One is, well, this planner doesn't work. I'm not consistent with it. So I better look for a new planner.
Oh, yes.
Right? That's all
Hallelujah.
or nothing thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, planning, weekly reviews, planning my schedule doesn't work. You know why? Because I didn't get everything done.
Yeah. Well, and that's all or nothing thinking and inverted logic.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
that's a double header.
Exactly. And then the other thing that comes into play with, I think, all or nothing thinking, again, that people may not, well, actually, I think this one people are more aware of, and that's where perfectionism plays a role in.
Yeah.
And I think that more people are aware of this than probably the all or nothing, because they know that, okay, I may be procrastinating on something because I want this to be perfect and I have this fear that it's not going to be. So it's hard to get started. Right. And I think people are more aware of that. And because they don't feel like it's ever going to be good enough, then they don't finish it. So there's that executive function going on of hard to get started, but also hard to follow through.
This is what we were talking about with Eric Tivers on the show a couple of weeks back, right? This is backpocketing success.
Yeah.
This is the thing that I run into all the time. It has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, people will not love it. Therefore, I shouldn't do it because clearly people would not love it.
It is, exactly. It ties
totally
right into that.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Well, and then when you do end up procrastinating or you put it in your back bucket, then we're not happy with the results. We don't feel good about it. And then it lowers our confidence and self-worth and all of that. So it's, there's a lot of dangers here with this type of thinking. And of course, it is directly related to limiting beliefs, which I do believe we also talked about with Eric as well.
Yeah, right.
But this type of thinking cements those limiting beliefs. It just keeps putting, them in front of you and you keep believing them. So that's a huge danger, with this type of thinking. Also, I think what happens is it really creates people to have extreme and impossible expectations.
Yeah. Well, talk more about that. Like, what do you see when you're working with your clients?
Well, I think that like for the planner, for example, this planner doesn't work because they're looking for it to be the perfect planner. But the planner is only a tool, right? There probably isn't any such thing as perfect, because even if you think that it's the perfect planner, in 2 months it might change, your schedule might change or something changes and now it's not perfect anymore.
Right.
So I think that it's this expectation that everything, again, has to be perfect. It has to be 100%. And so you're looking at 100%. Well, 80% is pretty darn good. Right? I mean, there isn't anything wrong with 80%, but you're putting yourself up to this expectation that you may never be able to reach. And the thing that we have to remember too is the ADHD mind is wired differently. The brain is wired differently. So if you're trying to compare yourself to somebody else that doesn't have ADHD, or maybe they have ADHD, but they manage it differently. I mean, it's all perception, right? We can't compare ourselves to other people too. I mean, that's a huge problem. And
even a dirt road is still a road.
Yeah. So all of these things kind of just really don't work. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest danger, I think, for me. And this is the thing that I find myself running into and constantly talking myself off the ledge is calcification, right? It's this idea that, as you said, once I get into that negative self-talk, that I get stuck there.
Right.
And it takes feats of mental gymnastics to get out of that. But I have to keep telling myself, right, again, the dirt road's still a road. I can still walk it. It's still moving in a direction. It's not a wash in a field. I know that if I can just take the next step, then I will be taking a step. And that is something to celebrate.
Well, it is. And exactly what you're saying is that when you can focus on that next step, and you're focusing on the fact that you've already gone a mile, and yeah, maybe you've got 5 miles more to go, but you've already gone a mile. So when we have the all or nothing thinking, we're not even looking at what we've already done as success, right? We're not paying attention to that. We're only paying attention to what's left. And so that's a missed opportunity there, because we're missing our progress. And so much of the time it's that progress that keeps us motivated to keep moving. So if we can focus, wow, look at that. I just went a mile. How awesome is that? That was a mile I didn't have yesterday. And keep, one step forward, one step forward. So that's one of the definite issues that we need to address, is just keep looking forward and look at what you've done, because there's success in that, and we just forget it. A couple things for people to be aware of, because this is the thing, is people are not aware of how they're talking to themselves, that internal dialogue. It gets missed almost every single time I'm coaching somebody. And that's why it's so important that we talk about this, because people just don't see it. They don't see it until it's pointed out to them. So what I want people to watch for is when you are talking to yourself about something, which we all do, right? We all have these little conversations.
Pick a day.
In the mirror. Look for the words when you say never. Never is an all or nothing word, right?
Yeah.
I can't, right? That is a word that we say a lot. Every time.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all...
That pretty much is all or nothing.
Yeah,
it's all. That's the all part.
Yeah. And then you also have to think about just the word or. Again, is it black or white? Maybe it's gray. I mean, right? So we have to, these are the kinds of words that we have to think about when we're talking to ourselves. And the other thing that I talk to people about is to remember that their past doesn't dictate their future. By the time people come to me, of course they're overwhelmed, right? And so they'll talk to me about their challenges, and they'll really go into their stories about how this hasn't worked and the reasons why this is bad, and everything they've tried, but they don't necessarily think forward. They're really still hung up on kind of everything that went wrong, right? So the question that I would want to ask you is, if you're trying to overcome a challenge right now, or something's coming up and in the past it hasn't worked out so well, my question would be for you, then what needs to happen to make the future different? And what are your options? These are the things that move you out of the never, every single time I do this, I can't do this. I don't want to know what you can't do or what you didn't do. Really, what can you do now to make it different? And then what are your options? Because options is a word that is not all or nothing. It's giving you choice.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's giving you choice.
Well, and that gets back to this calcification point, right? People, I think, get calcified. They get stuck, cemented in yesterday. And particularly, when thinking about yesterday's experience, that you wish you could go back and change it, right? You wish you could have done something different. That is a painful place to live all the time, because not only are you not focused on what the next step is supposed to be, you're not even really aware of where you are right now.
Right. Couple suggestions for people to be a little bit more on top of this, to be a little bit more aware. Now that you've listened to us talk about it, think about in your life, where does this mindset occur for you? And if you're not sure, talk to your spouse, talk to a friend, talk to your mom, your dad, your sister, talk to your coach, your therapist, anybody that might be able to help you recognize it in a nice, non-judgmental way. I mean, this is to help you, not to make you feel bad, but really just to get an awareness of where this might happen in your life. And then again, I think noticing what's good, focusing on that good, focusing on what's worked for you, and it doesn't have to be all bad. So an example that I think is good is saying like, I worked really hard on that paper and I did the best I could. It's not saying I suck at this paper. It was terrible. Or, you could say that I worked really hard on my presentation and I did the best that I could. But really seeing that I put the effort in there and I did the best that I could.
Here's what I learned about writing papers from this experience.
Exactly. Here's what I learned about, talking in front of people. Next time I'm, going to make sure the microphone works. I mean, I don't
right.
Whatever it is, but switching your internal dialogue, right? And then I think it is starting to, when you start to relive the past, again, asking yourself, what are my options here? I had a client tell me the other day that I thought this was really great. She said, okay, I'm drawing the line in the sand. And the line is past and future. I'm not looking at the past anymore. I'm just looking at the future. I'm drawing the line. So and I think that that's a great visual of thinking about that. When you start going down that past, what are your options for the future? And, going back to expectations, we talked about this at the beginning when your expectations are too high. So this is definitely a tough one for a lot of folks with ADHD. They think they can do more in the time that they have available, or they overpromise because, again, they want to please people and they want to do these things, but then they find that they don't have the time to do it. So you really do have to be realistic with what your expectations are, what's right for you, and stop comparing yourself to other people.
That's huge. Oh my goodness, do I ever fall into that too?
Yes.
I think anybody who creates things, releases things into the world, if you've kind of gotten over the hump of releasing episode 1 of your YouTube video, or written that first blog post or that first editorial, or that first report that brings you out of the shadows at work, and other people are able to read it. Think about, what would this other colleague or this other writer or this other creator have done better that I didn't do? And that is another paralyzing challenge.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah, it's there's nothing good that's going to come out of that.
Nothing.
And then the last point that I would say is to practice. Just like anything that we talk about, we have to practice. I mean, none of this is just going to come to you, because you've listened to this podcast. It's, oh boy, I'm never going to think of all or nothing thinking again. I mean, it's not, we all know that that's not the way it works, but you can certainly practice with something maybe small. And when you do notice, that you're kind of thinking this way, to stop yourself and say, okay, what can I do differently? And how are you going to feel if you have a little bit more flexibility in your life? How would it feel if it didn't have to be good or bad? And just be a little less hard on yourself, right? And I think that when we are like that, when we're kinder to ourselves, then we tend to be more happier. Right? With what we have and where we're at.
I love it. Great stuff. Hopefully, some of you out there connect with this. I have a hard time imagining that you haven't run into this, but we are taking next week off for spring break here. So, when you don't see an episode from us in your podcast feed, don't worry, we'll be back. Thank you to everybody for downloading and listening to the show, for your time and especially your attention. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you the week after next, right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.